Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, friends in need. Japan stands ready to do its part in restructuring Sri Lankan debt once the preconditions are met, while the US expresses willingness to help the country through the Paris Club. TikTok. Sri Lanka needs to work quickly in getting its debt restructured or risk sinking deeper into the crisis, says World Bank President David Malpass.
The most important thing is for them to have a plan and to execute it quickly, because the risk and the cost is doing things slowly in the midst of a crisis.
The nature of things. President Ranil Wickremesinghe proposes the establishment of a climate change university in Sri Lanka to broaden knowledge on need to tackle climate issues. Bloating. Headline inflation in Sri Lanka rises by 5.5% to 69.8% in September 2022. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Friday the 30th of September 2022.
Vim Deera milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to AdaDerana 24 English News Service. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, Japanese Finance Minister Shunichi Suzuki says Japan stands ready to do their part in assisting Sri Lanka in restructuring the country's debt. Speaking to media in Manila, the Japanese Finance Minister, however, said conditions such as providing necessary information, making efforts to involve China, India and other creditors, and boosting transparency is essential from the Sri Lankan side for Japan to fulfill their promise. Shunichi Suzuki met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe in the Philippine capital Manila, where both earlier addressed the 55th Governors Meeting of the Asian Development Bank. Following the meeting, the Japanese Finance Minister told media that he urged Sri Lanka to provide necessary information, make efforts to get China, India and other creditors involved, and boost transparency on restructuring Sri Lankan debt. Finance Minister Suzuki went on to say that Japan will do its part if such preconditions are met. During his visit to Japan, President Wickremesinghe met Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Wednesday and discussed the debt issue. According to the Japanese Foreign Minister, the two leaders had recognized the importance of fair and transparent debt restructuring that involves all creditor nations. Prior to the president's visit to Japan, Japanese ambassador in Colombo, Mizukoshi Hideaki, said Japan stands by Sri Lanka in support of the debt restructure negotiation process so that Sri Lanka can reach the final agreement with the IMF, adding that they intend to play a constructive role with other creditor countries, including China and India. Now, the US ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, says the United States is ready to support Sri Lanka in restructuring its debt through the Paris Club and called on all parties to come to the negotiation table for talks. She made these comments while addressing the annual general meeting of the American Chamber of Commerce last evening. Speaking at the same event, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe said the government hopes they will be able to get some relief from its creditors during the talks on debt restructuring.
The 30th Annual General Meeting of the American Chamber of Commerce was held in Colombo last evening under the patronage of the U.S. Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, and Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe.
We are pleased that Sri Lanka and the IMF reached a staff-level agreement. And a lot of that is the hard work of the governor here. The $2.9 billion program, if approved by the IMF board, would help restore macroeconomic stability, safeguard financial stability, protect the vulnerable, implement structural reforms, and most importantly, address corruption, all to encourage Sri Lanka's economy to grow to its full potential. While we are all celebrating this very important milestone, now is not the time to be complacent. Much more hard work lies ahead, as we all know. Now more than ever, the private sector can make a difference in creating a more inclusive and sustainable economy. In his speech to Parliament, President Wickramasinghe committed his administration to establishing a state-owned enterprise restructuring unit to recommend how to reform Sri Lanka's loss-making government-run companies. The work on these critical reforms must start immediately, and the results need to address the root causes of this crisis so that the country can finally enshrine international standards of good governance and transparency for the benefit of all Sri Lankans. Similarly, there should be swift action to establish and convene the Parliamentary Committee on Ways and Means, National Debt Management Agency, National Agency for Public-Private Partnership, and the other committees and agencies that were all laid out in the President's speech. We would support work on all these measures. Before the IMF board will approve Sri Lanka's 17th assistance package, and we really hope this is the last, the government must negotiate with its official creditors to provide adequate financing assurances. The United States, through the Paris Club, looks forward to collaborating with Sri Lanka in this effort. The President asked all creditors to sing from the same hymn sheet. So, too, we call on all parties to come to the negotiating table and join this choir.
As Ambassador Cartwright mentioned in our process with the IMF and also in the debt negotiations, we certainly sincerely hope that we can get back to with some relief from our creditors. That's very important that we treat everyone comparable basis. On that basis, we would want to get back to the normal repayment schedules so that we certainly allow people who are invested and place trust in Sri Lankan growth story to be able to recover their value of the investment that they have made. I hope with the support coming from mainly from the US and other countries, we should be able to stabilize the economy, and the investors who invested in Sri Lanka will be able to recover their value for their investment on a medium to long term basis. I think that's what we all are trying here and doing everything possible for us to get the economy stabilize as soon as possible. When you look at the official side from government to government, we know the US has been supporting Sri Lanka, and also the US has been made shareholder of the largest multilateral agencies like the US, the World Bank and the IMF. The support we are getting and we will be getting, especially in these difficult times, is quite crucial. This is where US obviously has already promised, and also we are for sure they are very forthcoming in supporting Sri Lanka in this kind of situation from the official side.
Now, meanwhile, World Bank President David Malpass said Sri Lanka should move quickly in the debt restructuring process and assess the IMF program, as in slowing things down, the risk and cost of doing things amidst the crisis completely continue to rise. He made these comments while addressing an event at the Stanford University in California.
Sri Lanka had borrowed heavily. World Bank is not so directly involved in that. They're not one of the low-income countries that we would work on a joint basis with the IMF on. So the IMF is engaged in Sri Lanka, and also the bilateral lenders. So Japan, China, and India are all working with the government of Sri Lanka, which I think is good. And it's important that they move as quickly as countries hit really a deep crisis as Sri Lanka did. The most important thing is for them to have a plan and to execute it quickly, because the risk and the cost is doing things slowly in the midst of a crisis.
Yeah.
Now, President Ranil Wickramasinghe has proposed the establishment of an international university on climate change in Sri Lanka in order to enable students from any country in the world to engage in educational activities during the discussions he had with the Asian Development Bank today. During the meeting, the ADB President Masatsugu Asakawa assured President Ranil Wickramasinghe that he would continue to cooperate with Sri Lanka. During his visit to the Philippines, President Ranil Wickramasinghe met President of the Asian Development Bank, Masatsugu Asakawa, at the ADB headquarters in Manila this morning. During discussions, President Wickramasinghe briefed the ADB President on Sri Lanka's engagement with the International Monetary Fund. The President also expressed his gratitude towards the ADB President for the emergency assistance provided to Sri Lanka in the past. Further, Discussions between both the parties were made on further strengthening the long-standing relationship between Sri Lanka and the ADB, during which ADB President Masatsugu Asagawa assured President Ranil Wickremesinghe that he would continue to cooperate with Sri Lanka. What's more, President Wickremesinghe has proposed the establishment of an international university on climate change in Sri Lanka in order to enable students from any country in the world to engage in educational activities during discussions with the Asian Development Bank officials. Now, country representative of the United Nations World Food Programme said that the necessary measures are being taken by the Sri Lankan government and the UNFPA to ensure adequate fertilizer is imported to strengthen food security in the country. Speaking at a media briefing, the FAO country representative said that healthy Maha-season harvest is critical to ensure self-sufficiency in the country.
Can you tell us about the findings of the recent crop and food security assessment report?
Our findings were that the Maha of 21-22 did show a decline of about 40% in production, and at the time when the report was being compiled, Yala harvesting had not been done. It so happens that as Yala harvesting is now happening, we find that the projections of the report coming true, and the Yala season of 2022 also will now be facing decline of at least 40% in food production. The report therefore recommended that adequate amount of inputs must be made available going forward in the Maha season, which starts in a month from now, if Sri Lanka wants to recover quickly from the debacle that it has faced in the last two production seasons. That's on the agriculture side. But on the food security side, the report found that about 66,000 people were suffering from acute malnutrition and food insecurity, whereas about 6 million people could be termed to be on the verge and suffering from moderate food insecurity. So it is a grim situation, but I would say that the government is taking all measures possible to bring in adequate amount of fertilizers into the country. I'm given to understand that the World Bank financed urea tender is about to be, the orders are about to be placed, which will ensure that adequate amount of urea is present in the country for the farmers to have an effective Maha season. Fingers crossed, we all hope that adequate inputs reach the farmers in time and we all have a good Maha season, because that will be critical for bringing Sri Lanka back on a path of self-sufficiency.
Speaking further, the FAO country representative in Sri Lanka, Bimlendra Sharan, commented on the projects and programs that are conducted by his organization to ensure nutrition and food security amidst the ongoing crisis.
We have taken a big step in providing for school gardens. Currently, we are working on 100 school gardens, and we have a plan to work on about 500 more school gardens. This is through our own technical cooperation program funding and also through the funding received from DFAT Australia. With the help of New Zealand government, we are targeting 2,250 families where children suffering from acute malnutrition are found. And we are preparing to provide supplementary nutrition to such children. But we are not going to stop at that. We are also going to provide the same 2,250 families who get supplementary nutrition for the child with home gardens to ensure that the vegetable production from the home gardens go ahead and meet the micronutrient requirement of the child over a longer period of time, to ensure that the child actually comes out of the malnutrition stage. So it's a very well thought out strategy. We are working with many organizations, including WFP, UNICEF, to ensure that Sri Lanka emerges out of this crisis of nutrition.
Now, the Red Cross Society of China has decided to provide more food packs to the neediest families living in the northern province of Sri Lanka. In a statement, the Chinese embassy in Colombo said that the donation worth $150,000 is made through the Sri Lanka Red Cross Society. In May and July, the Chinese organization gifted dry rations to nearly 10,000 families in Homagama and Nuwara. Stay with us for more news on the other side of this short break.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමෝතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇති අයට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. Now, Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne says Sri Lanka should call for a national determination where all sectors of Sri Lankan society should come together to discuss fundamental issues such as national identity, reconciliation, transitional justice, governance structure and economic revival. Addressing the 15th International Research Conference of the Sir John Kotalawala University, the Defence Secretary said that such determination is a fundamental step towards building consensus and re-legitimizing state institutions and private organizations in the country towards a common goal.
15th International Research Conference of General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University was held yesterday under the patronage of Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne. The conference this year was themed Economic Revival, National Security and Sustainability through advancement of science, technology and innovation.
At a strategic standpoint, keeping the past and also most recent lessons learnt in mind, with the newfound leadership of the present government, Sri Lanka should call for a national determination where all sectors of Sri Lankan society, including civil organizations, security institutions, political entities and business associations, come together to discuss fundamental issues such as national identity, national reconciliation, transitional justice, governance structure, economic revival and much more. This is a fundamental step towards building consensus and legitimizing state institutions and private organizations in the country towards a common goal. Not only would such an effort-based process serve as the foundation for a national pact addressing the country's issues, it would also compel every group within society, especially the investors, to actively participate in the state-building efforts towards the economic revival and sustainability through establishing a secure country, giving due consideration to the scientific and technological innovations. Furthermore, giving high priority to providing solutions to the country's most pressing matters of concern. To improve the world's image on the Sri Lankan society, the Sri Lankan government must take every step necessary to recover high priority initiatives in the fields of the economy, institution building and political reform. Whilst giving a true meaning to the said initiatives in order to address emerging challenges, promoting more research and development becomes a task of topmost priority.
The former Army Commander and Parliamentarian of the Samagi Janabala Vegia, Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca, responds to claims on the large defence budget, saying national security is the key for any country to prosper economically. Speaking to Indivari Amwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Field Marshal Fonseca said the collapse of the country's economy is not an excuse to let national security to shatter. He is also of the view that the military manpower of Sri Lanka needs to be strengthened since the country lacks advanced military equipment.
This is also a period when continuously following the war, the international community has pointed fingers at the Sri Lanka army, alleging crimes and acts of war committed by the side of the army. How do you stand against such claims with your people?
6 months after the war was over, I came to politics. I contested for the presidential election, 2010 January. Then there was a general election also in 2010 April. The Tamil National Alliance, representing the majority of the Tamils in the north, they got only about 80,000 votes in the general election. 4 months before that, that was 6 months after finishing the war, 150,000 Tamils voted for me. So that indicates what I did as the army commander, they have appreciated. They didn't have anything against me. If the army has been committing war crimes, as some people say, involved in the genocide, then the Tamil civilians will not accommodate me like that. But unfortunately, up to now, I have never been given an opportunity to explain to anybody. Even if some UN officials want to come here and meet me and question me, I am ready to give a statement and explain to them.
Regardless of what government is in power, if you were asked to defend Sri Lanka as the former army commander and stand up to these acts of these allegations, would you still do that?
Definitely I'll do it.
Mullivaikkal massacre is infamous topic that is famously discussed among the international community, again alleging that 40 to 70,000 Tamil civilians in the part of Sri Lanka were killed by the actions of the government forces.
No, it's a deliberate lie, definitely exaggerated. Up to the last 2 weeks of the war, I think about last 3 weeks, when we were almost surrounding Pudukudirupu area. By that time, the uncleared area was about 15 kilometers by 8 kilometers. Up to that time, the ICRC reps are there. And we were coordinating with ICRC. Whatever the casualties which were there, ICRC were bringing them to the beach, and then there was a Navy ship with ICRC reps going and bringing them towards Pulmude. And we were treating them. So if there were thousands and thousands dying, the ICRC would have seen it. No? And of course, if 40,000 died there, the whole of that area must be full of skeletons. There won't be anything else in that area.
Your visa was rejected in 2017 to attend the UN General Assembly, and you too said that these allegations should be investigated. Do you think sufficient progress has been made in Sri Lanka to investigate the allegations that have been brought against us at the UNHRC?
No, I don't think up to now that nothing has happened. When I was the commander, after I finished the war, I started the inquiry, in fact. I wanted to do an inquiry against one senior officer, but there are allegations. These are not huge allegations, there are thousands and hundreds of murdered or something. But there was one incident reported to me, I started an inquiry. But what happened was, before I finished the inquiry, I was removed, and the same man, the culprit, was appointed army commander. So the inquiry was not conducted afterwards. It was hushed up. Basically, anywhere from the very inception of the army deployments in this country, even during 71 insurgency, there were murders which took place. The army officers and some soldiers were given death sentence. Then Krishantha Kumaraswamy, when she was killed in Jaffna, 5 soldiers were given death sentence. So there was no case of we trying to hush up anything. We never accommodated ill discipline in the army. We never wanted to protect the soldiers at the expense of the civilian life. We don't do it. So these 1 or 2 incidents, they would have inquired into those things, taken the culprits to task. If that happened, more probably the international community also would have got the impression, okay, these people are doing something. But the politicians, they were not smart enough due to total ignorance. They didn't know how to handle these issues.
The defense budget has been questioned at several fora, especially given the current economic situation. How do you look at the defense budget and whether Sri Lanka requires such to defend the nation at this juncture?
It's like this. Our economy has fallen and it is shattered. Does it mean we must allow the security also to shatter? We must drop the guard also. If any country is to prosper economically, first they must have the security in shape, security intact. Because we don't have money to do various other things, you can't sell the way you are selling the land here and there. You can't sell the military also off. The military has to be there for any country. Talking about the budget, I'll give you one example. Singapore, 3.5 million population. The biggest defense budget in Southeast Asia. Their defense budget is bigger than Malaysia, bigger than Taiwan, bigger than Thailand, bigger than Australia, bigger than Myanmar. But the country is only 25 miles by 25 miles long. So the defense is expensive. You can't have the cake and eat the cake, of course. If you want a defense, it is expensive. In our country, I saw there's a list of somebody had highlighted British Army 120,000, Canadian Army 80,000, like that. The quality of the army cannot be judged by the numbers. They have less numbers because they have superb equipment, very expensive equipment. You don't have any of those things. Our Air Force has got only 1 ground attack aircraft. The Navy has only 2 offshore patrol crafts. They don't have a single battleship. We have the 2 Second World War type tanks in the army, steel battle tanks. So because the equipment is very cheap and very low cost, because we don't have the good equipment, we have to increase the manpower. If you have good equipment, if you have enough mobility for the army, we can reduce the strength to about 50%. So those who are talking about the economy because they are failing in economics, they are trying to ruin the military also. They can't do that.
Now, former President Maithripala Sirisena has filed a writ application before the Court of Appeal requesting to suspend the case against him filed before the 4th Magistrates Court over the Easter Sunday terror attacks. The 2 victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks, Reverend Father Cyril Gamini and Jesudasan Nadesan, respectively, had filed a private plaint seeking to name the former president as an accused of the Easter Sunday attacks as he failed to prevent them. Former President Maithripala Sirisena was named as a suspect in the plaint filed regarding allegations, alleged negligence and failure to prevent the terrorist attacks that occurred on the 21st of April 2019. Earlier, the Colombo Fort Magistrate Tilna Gamage had issued notice on him to appear before the courts on the 14th of October in accordance with President's Counsel Rienzi Arsakularatna's request to name the former president as a suspect and issue a notice summoning him before the court when the private plane was taken into consideration. Now, headline inflation of Sri Lanka has increased to 69.8% in September 2022 from 64.3% in August. According to the Department of Census and Statistics, that is an increase of 8.9% index points, while the CCPI for all items for the month of September 2022 was 244.7. This increase in year-on-year inflation was driven by the monthly increases of both food and non-food categories. Accordingly, food inflation year-on-year increased to 94.9% in September from 93.7% in August, while non-food inflation year-on-year increased to 57.6% in September from 50.2% in August. Now, Sri Lankan shares fell for a second straight week today, dragged down by industrial and financial stocks, but rounded off with a quarter with solid gains. The index advanced 35.26% for the latest 3 months, its biggest quarterly gain since September 2010. The all-share index today settled 0.21% low at 9,931.07 on Friday, its second highest session of losses. Trading volume on the ASPI fell to 99.4 million shares from 214.2 million in the previous session. Conglomerates Expo Lanka Holdings PLC and other major indexes dragged the index down. And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.